Welcome to the Fiber Tales podcast. My name is Lærke and I'm coming to you from Odense, Denmark, where as you can see it's pretty sunny. It's the most amazing, beautiful weather. Today it's freezing. I think it's -3 degrees Celsius and it's just, I love this winter weather. I've been waiting for it for the last 2 months because we didn't really have any winter weather. We just had a lot of rain, a lot of gray, cold, disgusting weather, and now it's finally the kind of winter weather I really like. It did snow a little bit yesterday, but the snow is already gone, so now it's just, gone. You can see a little bit here and there, but it's not really thick enough to use it for anything, so I could use a little more snow. I really like when it's all white outside. It makes everything so much brighter and so much more lovely. And I'm super happy because it also means I can wear my really thick woolly sweaters. This one is made in a Gotland wool and it's really warm, and generally I can wear it if I'm outside, but if I'm inside it's generally too warm and then I will just take it off. I'm sipping on a bit of tea today with honey because I think I'm a little bit sick. I'm getting a bit sick. I'm feeling okay, but my throat is really thick and a bit swollen, and that's my own fault because I went out on last week to take pictures for my newest pattern, and I got a bit cold because I was out there for half an hour to an hour just wearing this sweater, and it was a bit windy, so it wasn't that bad. It was, I think, 3-4 degrees Celsius, but it was just, the wind was pretty cold. So I think it's my own fault, so I just cross my fingers that it's not gonna be too bad this time. I wanted to do a little bit more of an introduction to this channel because I already explained in the first episode what I want to do with the channel, what is the reason behind me doing a podcast. But I really wanted to explain a bit more what you can expect to see in the podcast, and this will mainly be about knitting, and I would of course like to talk about my designs and design process, but there might be some sewing as well. I do sew. Generally I sew more in the summer, so you will see more sewing related things. I really like to sew dresses and skirts and stuff, so those will mainly come in the warmer months. And yeah, so that's gonna be it. I thought it would be interesting to do just the normal kind of podcast content, but also a little bit have a topic for each episode. It might not be for each episode, but for example, for today's episode, I really would like to talk about the design process. So I will first do the normal part of the episode and show you what I've been knitting on, which isn't much this week, and then afterwards I will try to talk a little bit more in depth about the design process. To start off, I would like to talk a little bit about what I'm wearing, because I am wearing my newest design, which is this sweater that I call Røtur. Røtur means roots in Faroese. Faroese? What you speak in the Faroe Islands. And I named it Roots because of the pattern on the yoke, which is a 2-color brioche pattern. And I think I will wait and talk a little bit more about this pattern when I'm talking about the design process. The pattern it was just released on the 31st, and a few days later in Danish, first in English and then in Danish, and so you can find it in my Ravelry shop. I will have a link down below if you're interested to go and take a look. And together with this lovely Nordic inspired sweater, I am wearing, I don't know if you can see these little earrings. They are made from, I bought them at a market in the North Atlantic house here in Odense. So we have this house that is a place for all the countries that are part of the Danish kingdom. So Denmark is, let's say, what we call Denmark is generally considered the islands and the peninsula that forms Denmark between Germany and Sweden and Norway and England on the other side. But we also, part of the Danish kingdom, you have Greenland, you have the Faroe Islands, and you have, you used to have Iceland. Iceland was Danish up until, I don't know how long ago it is, but I would say 60, 70 years. I hope I'm not wrong, ago. And so these countries, they have a connection to Denmark that's more recent, because Norway, for example, was also part of the Danish kingdom. I mean, if you go even further back, you will have in the Viking era, it was also England was under Danish rule at some time, and Estonia and blah blah. We're not going to go into that, and Sweden as well, and some parts of Germany. But the three, let's say, countries that still has some connection to Denmark is Greenland, Faroe Islands, and Iceland. So if you go to the North Atlantic house here in Odense, they have, it's like a cultural house for these cultures. So I went there for the Christmas market, and it was really lovely. They had a lot of people selling stuff made out of seal skin. Yeah, I guess, and also from other like bones, antlers and stuff. So these ones, if I understood it correctly, they're made out of antlers, and I think they're really beautiful. And everything was handmade. Oh, they had the they didn't have it so you could buy it, but they had things made out of moscus. Oh, I will put it in English somewhere, because it's this big furry ox kind of animal. Musk? I'm really not sure what it's called in English. I should have looked this up. But it's the softest wool, and it's the most expensive wool in I think in the world. I'm not quite sure, but it's really amazing. And these ladies were selling little mitts made out of this wool, and I don't know how they were not that expensive. And I mean, the price for the wool itself would be pretty much the price that these mitts were that they had put in these mitts. So I think they were selling them. The work was pretty much for free. Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. But I got to touch it. You couldn't buy the actual wool, but I got to touch it. And they also had this einrum. I don't know how to pronounce it, but this Icelandic wool that it's a mix between, what is it, silk, I think, and wool that is spun together. I will look that up and put it here if it's wrong. And that was interesting to look at, and I actually should go back someday, because even though the market is only for Christmas, they have a little shop that still sells, and they have the wool there. So that's a tip. If you live in Odense and you're Odense and you want to see this wool, you can go there. And also it was really fascinating to see the Greenlandish ladies. They make this pearl embroidery, or yeah, like woven fabric of pearl. So that's actually where this whole yoke tradition comes from the Greenlandish pearl yokes. If you have never seen them, you should really go look them up on Google them and look on Wikipedia, because they have a whole history about this intricate pearl yokes with plenty of colors, and they're so beautiful. So that was really, it was really nice to have a look. And although Greenland is a part of the Danish kingdom, and I've been there with a school trip, but I think many Danes don't really have a good idea about the traditions there. It's more like a little stereotypical, because it's far away and they're not, it's a small country and so on. But it's part of our common culture, so I think it's really important to know about the Greenlandish culture, and it's really interesting. So sorry about all the ams today. I'm trying to, my throat is really killing me. Now another am. I will cut out some of the ams in the end. Yep. And then I don't have one of the, let me just get it. I'm really prepared today, I'm really prepared. So this is the finished object. I actually did show you this last week. It's the scarf I made for my dad. But I attached the fringe to the end, as you can see here. And I also washed it another time, so now I can really talk about how the yarn is behaving and how I did the fringe, because I did get some questions. Let me just show. Okay, here you can see a little bit better. I think I would have made the fringe a little bit, I would have used a few less strands, because as I washed the yarn, it kind of puffed up a lot as all the spinning oil went out. So they're it's a little bit thicker than what I would normally have made, but I'm not gonna redo it. I think it's fine, and it would probably get a little flattened out as with wear. So what I did is I took this little booklet that I have, this little notebook, and I just, let me grab some yarn. So I just put the yarn around for as many times as you feel like looks good. And I think I did 8, how do you call it? I put it around 8 times. And then I cut it in the top, and of course not in the end. And what I would suggest, if you don't have much yarn left, is count how many tassels you want, or how much fringe you want, and then do the amount of fringe, and don't attach them. And then in the end, if you can see you don't have enough, you can maybe remove a few strands. And like I did 8, and I could easily have taken out 2 strands, and then I would have enough for another one or 2 more or something like that. All I did after I have this piece, all these strands together that are like in a U shape, is I just took a crochet hook and put it through here and made a little knot like that. Yeah. So, and I used the very last strand. I have nothing left, and that's so satisfying. It's so satisfying. Let me just show you. I mean, you can actually put it around twice, but then it's a little bit short. But the way my dad will wear it is just crossed over like that. So it shouldn't be too long. Then he just has a lot of scarf to fiddle around with in the jacket. So I think this will be fine. I'm really pleased with it, and I washed it twice. What I did, because as I talked about before, it had a lot of spinning oil and it was pretty smelly. So what I did is I prepared warm water with wool soap, and then I put it in and I left it there until the water was cold, and then I rinsed it, and then I dried it, attached the fringe, but that way I wouldn't do it another time, and then I washed it again the same way, and finally the smell came out, so I'm really happy about that. And it's pretty soft now. I don't know if you can see the texture. It's a little more, the yarn bloomed. It's not scratchy when you hold it up against your neck. I mean, maybe if you're sweating it could become a bit scratchy, but I asked my dad and he said he didn't mind, so I was really happy about that, because I mean he didn't mind that it would be a more rustic yarn. So this one is he's getting it next weekend because I'm going to see my parents. So, and hopefully I can also get some footage of the sheep, and maybe I can use that to tell a little bit more about how it was to grow up on a farm with sheep. because that was a pretty awesome childhood, and yeah, maybe I can figure out something about that. So that was my only finished project. I didn't finish object. I didn't manage to do anything else. To finish anything else. I do have the shawl I showed you last time, but it's really hard to show because my cable is not long enough, and my friend is actually gonna drop off another cable today. Oh, my brain, today. And so she's gonna drop off another cable, and then I will attach them. I will join them, and then I will have a much longer cable. But here you can see a little bit of the scarf, and it's confusing because of course it should be turned this way. So this is the top. No, I'm doing it wrong again. Oh god. Okay, I'm trying not to drop any stitches. I'm sorry, I'm really a mess trying to show this, and now I'm getting the yarn all tangled, and this is lovely. So this is the top, and this is the bottom, and since it's a bit triangular shaped, it looks really weird on the knitting needles. So, but yeah, I've been doing a lot of knitting, and I got to the part where I have to actually add in the details. So I won't talk so much more about this because it's a design that I'm working on. I will only say and mention that the yarn is, I said this in the last episode, but just in case you didn't watch, that the yarn is Gregoria Fibers. Yep, and it's in this colorway. It's the fur colorway, and it's a really lovely yarn, really lovely. It's not the kind of lofty springy yarn, but it feels very luxurious in some way, even though it's quite rustic. So it's an interesting mix of rustic and really drapey and sleek kind of yarn. And this is the other colorway that I'm gonna use in this shawl design, and it's called Tile Brown. Did I say this was fur? I think I said this was fur. This is Tile Brown. Yeah, I'm really happy. I'm gonna wind the skein tonight, and yeah, actually it's funny because as you can see, I don't have a ball winder, so I just do I have a lot of balls, but in some way I really like this. I really like having balls of yarn, like the old traditional kind of balls, because when I was a child, we would always get this is the yarn that my parents get from their own sheep, made from their own fleece. And so as a child, my mom would have these big bags of skeins, and so in the evening she would ask me to hold the yarn, so I would sit and hold. We didn't have a swift, so I would sit and hold the yarn like between my hands, and then she would wind the balls into this kind of balls, and I don't know, it's just for some reason this is the way a ball should look like to me, which after I discovered the whole knitting community and I saw cake for the first time. I mean, I guess I've seen cakes in the shop, but yeah, it was just so weird for me to see these cakes when for me this is a yarn ball as I've always known them. And yes, they do roll away. I'm not I don't do any tricks to keep them to be able to pull from the center, and yeah, I like to pull from the center, so but I don't know, there's some satisfaction. As you can see, I always twist it as I go, so they get this. I hold my thumb and then I do this all the time when I'm winding it, and this way you get this little bit funny spiral system. But then I turn it around, and then I don't really have a specific method, and probably I should, because it's better for the I don't know if it's better for the twist of the yarn. I guess if I really go into the technique, it probably is, but I just like to sit and relax and wind my ball and not think too much about it. Yeah, I think I got sidetracked a little bit. My other work in progress is the Birkin sweater. So let me get that one, because I apparently didn't prepare anything today. so here it is. And this is the Birkin sweater by Caitlin Hunter, Boiler Knitworks, and I guess everybody has already knitted or are knitting it in some way, but it's a lovely pattern, and I'm knitting it in the Urso Yarn Co. Yarn that I got in a kit. I talked more about this in one of my last episodes, but look at this yarn. It is just so pretty. Can you see the colors happening here? This one, I think it's my favorite. I really like this one. It has pinks and it's so pretty, but this one is also really nice. It's very deep. Yeah, these are looking a little bit messed up by now. So the thing is, I think I might rip back and redo the flower portion. I mean, I'm okay happy with the leaves, but for some reason trying to do the flowers with the 3 strands and the superwash is behaving a little bit different from what I'm used to. So I actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to steam it with my iron, not touching, but just steam it a little bit and see if the stitches will even out, because I don't know if you can see, I don't like showing this so much because I don't like my stitches, but this is, some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller, because generally when I knit color work, I try not to knit too tight, but I just don't, I'm not satisfied, I have to admit. It's the first time knitting 3 strands, and it's not working for me. I mean, it's working, I'm getting used to it, but I don't like how it looks. It doesn't look neat and pretty, so yeah, that's that. So I'm just, it's a bit on ice right now. I'm not really knitting on it. I'm knitting a lot on my shawl design. Actually, I have to show you one thing about this shawl, because I talked about the Lykke needles in my first episode and how the paint came off. And actually it's pretty funny, because if you look at them now, the paint just came off completely. And I actually quite like it. They have this little bit antique looking golden color. And so I wrote them and they replied, and they are sending me a new set of needles. So I'm not really, the customer service has been great. I mean, for the price of these needles, I was expecting them to last a bit longer, but I mean, I was expecting the paint not to come off, and I guess it shouldn't. So they were great about it, and they're sending me another pair. But I'm actually thinking if I should try to get cables with a golden instead of silver, the silver end here with gold, because then they would go with my Lykke needles without paint. And actually I think they're quite nice without the paint, now that it has completely come off. Yeah, they're not bad, and I like knitting with them. So, and on the Birkin you can see I have I'm knitting on 3.25 millimeters, and these are still black, and you can see I don't know if you can see it properly, but it has the little number written here. That's the problem. Once the paint came off, I couldn't see the number anymore. So it's a little bit annoying when you're trying to figure out which needles you are looking at, especially because in the set they have 3.25, 3.5, 3.75, and 4, and then those are really similar in the sizes that it's not so easy to see the difference. And of course I have a tool to measure, but I prefer if I don't have to go through that much hassle to figure out the size. Okay, so those are my works in progress. Yeah, I've been working also a lot on writing up, well, the pattern. It was already finished, but just to get all the layout looking nice for the release, and editing the pictures, and there's a lot of work when you want to release a pattern. So I've been quite busy with the pattern for the last week. So yeah, so not so much knitting, but there were actually a couple of days where I didn't knit at all, and I was feeling pretty terrible about it. But I guess if I get a little stressed and I'm thinking about a lot of other things, sometimes I stop knitting. But then it came back, and it's the best feeling when you can feel like, okay, I can relax again. I released the pattern. It got a really great feedback. I got a lot of great comments, and people have been so great congratulating me because it was my first ever sweater pattern. I only released the hat before that I designed many years ago, and then the headband, which was free. So I was a bit nervous about releasing the pattern and what people would think, and I think I will go into to talking about the design process, because I can feel I'm already going there a little bit, and to talk about it, I will use this sweater as an example. So when I talked about it in the first episode, so I might be repeating myself a little bit, but I actually never really felt like interested in learning the brioche technique, mainly because right now I'm really into more rustic yarns, and I always saw brioche made in all these colorful yarns, and it's not that they're not pretty, it was just not what I was interested in at the moment. So and then I got the idea that I could combine my parents' yarn, which is a really rustic Gotland yarn, spun at the Hjelholt Uldspinderi, which is a local mill to where my parents live. So this yarn, actually, you can get it. It's called Dansk Pelsuld, 5.5 /2. And it's a really nice rustic yarn, and so I was really interested to see how this would knit up. And so I made a swatch, and I first of all, my idea was to just do like one section, then decrease, and then decrease again. One section, then increase and increase. So it would get this really pretty pattern. And so I did, and this one is knit with a thinner yarn on top, so it's a little thinner and a little more light. But I really wanted to use these two together, which are both my parents' yarn, and I really wanted to showcase this yarn. So that was my main focus, was I really wanted to make a sweater that would showcase the beautiful Gotland yarn, especially this charcoal, dark charcoal yarn, because I feel it's very difficult to, if you make like patterns in this yarn, they're just gonna disappear, like textured patterns. And I didn't want to make a colorwork sweater because I had a lot of colorwork sweaters in this yarn as a kid, and I just wanted to do something different, and I was really thinking about it for a long time, what I could come up with that would be a different kind of yarn, so of pattern, of a different idea. So when I was then I started swatching, and I really liked this swatch, so I was holding it up and I said, this would actually make a really nice yoke. It was not, the idea was not to make a sweater at first. The idea was actually to make a headband. So I ended up making the headband as well. And that is the Røtur pattern that I have on my Ravelry page. But this one, for some reason, I really liked it. So I did make this whole yoke during this pattern, and it turned out enormous. It was huge, because if you keep increasing this way, you just get way too many stitches. The problem is with the brioche, I was not really sure what I should expect, how much it would grow, and it's a very flexible, as you can see when you pull it, it's like wah, wah. So yeah, so I tried different things, and then I ended up with this pattern where you have every second one you make an increase. So the pattern is actually, for me, a little bit more natural in the way that it reminds me there's a bit more difference in the pattern, and it's like a bit more like roots. And yeah, it really reminded me of roots. It was not like I had the idea, I want to design something that looks like roots. It was more like I liked I saw it, and it just made me think of roots and something, like if you look at a tree that has fallen over and you just see the roots, how they grow out and keep spreading into more little, smaller roots every time. And so I also did a normal swatch. So this is the swatch in the lighter gray yarn. So I had these two swatches. This one I couldn't use for anything really because the other yarn I used was thinner. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, it's a thinner yarn. And it took me a lot of trial and error to get the yoke as I wanted it, but I'm really happy with how it looks. It's the same on the front and the back, and I didn't do any short row shaping, but you could probably put some in to the little rolled neckline. And also another option would be to do it after you finish the yoke or the colorwork section. So let me just try to show you. So after you finish the 2-color brioche, you get into these little, I don't think we would call them loose in Danish, which is lice, but I think, at least from what Ellie keeps saying, these should be considered lopper, which is fleece. I don't know, because in Danish I've always heard them that you talk about them as loose, but generally you would knit bottom up. So maybe I just never heard them that you talk about them as lopper, because that's not how you are knitting sweaters. Anyway, so there's a little color work. It's very simple. It's just one stitch. So it created a little more smooth transition from the brioche to the normal stockinette. And the sweater is just, the rest is just stockinette. And I guess you can see I haven't been wearing this sweater so much, as I said, it's been a little too warm. But it's once you start wearing it, and actually as you're working it in your hands, it just gets, see, it just gets really fluffy and gets this halo, and it gets softer and softer. So if you wear it for a long time, it will be really soft. Let me just get, I have a really old sweater that I think my mom knit for my grandma, and now I'm using it. Let me just get it so I can show you how the yarn behaves. Okay, so here you can see the lighter version of the Gotland wool. So over time they have had different colors made out of their own sheep fleece. And let me just try to show you. This one is so soft. It's not at all, I mean, it can be a bit prickly in the neckline, and that's why I always wear it with long sleeve t-shirts. But this one is so much softer. It's so much softer, and yeah, it just feels very different. So the yarn changes a lot with wear, and I think it's the kind of yarn that you should not you should not I think if you were I'm trying to say this again. I think if you were standing at a yarn booth and looking at different yarns and you would touch this, you would just say, unless you're really into rustic yarns, and I know some people are, you would just say, nah, this is too, it's too rustic, it's a little bit hard to the touch, and so you probably wouldn't want to knit with it, or you would think it can only be used for blankets, and it's really nice for blankets as well. But I think this yarn, it's quite perfect for garments like sweaters. But I would always use it for sweaters that you wear more like outdoor sweaters, or sweaters that you want to wear on top of a long sleeve t-shirt or something else, because a shirt is also really nice to wear underneath, because it can be a bit prickly if you're using the Gotland yarn. So even though the whole idea for this pattern was to make a sweater that is showcasing this beautiful rustic Gotland yarn, and doing something interesting with it that you maybe would not expect from this kind of yarn, I think it could be really fun for me to see this knit up in one of those hand-dyed speckled something yarns. I mean, why not? Because if you imagine it in like different colors, it could be really fun. It doesn't have to be knit in rustic yarns. It was just, my idea was to have this rustic, really warm, soft yoke. But I don't think it necessarily has to be done in a rustic yarn. So yeah, it would be fun for me to see. I hope somebody will knit it up in a very different yarn, because for me that's one of the most fun things when you release a pattern. Already when my testers were working on it, was different. They use different colors, and it just looks so different when you have, for example, as I said in the first episode, one of my testers had the more dark on the light one on the bottom and the dark on top, and it just looks completely different. Like if you see this and this, it looked much more like this. And another one was doing it in a blue and a mustard yellow, and again it really looks different depending on the colors you choose. Yeah, so I think I explained a little bit about the process, my ideas behind this sweater, why I chose to use the yarn that I did, and what I wanted to achieve, what was my goal. And I think I really reached that goal. I think I showcased this yarn in a beautiful and interesting way. I did some finishing that I'm crazy about, and I talked about it before. And it's this linen stitch cuff. Let's see if it's visible here. And I just love it. It's on both cuffs. It's not in the neck. In the neck I have just a really simple stockinette rolled hem, and it's also on the bottom. So, and it just gives it a really nice clean finish, without it being a rip or folded over. It just lies flat, and it's really beautiful. So that part I'm really pleased about, and yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I actually have the pattern. I had it printed, and the pictures also turned out nice, so it was worth the suffering a little bit. And as you can see, I made a little drawing of this sweater. Well, it's not a drawing, it's a color. It's a watercolor painting that I did, and then we put the numbers. My friend Heidi has been helping me with all the design and the layout, and she's great. Yeah, you can see the picture if you haven't seen it already. Yeah, actually I'm making, let me see if I can find one. I always make, when I have an idea for a design, this is not really a design idea, but I make this little watercolored gray sweaters, and I can just put whatever on top I want. And then if I have an idea, I just want to see how it looks. It's yeah, it's really nice to make it more visual. I think I've said this now 3 times. I'm sorry, I'm not. I always feel like if I look too much into my notes, or I try to stick too much with what I thought from the beginning, it gets much more stiff. So I might, yeah, it's going a bit all over the place. But so as I said a couple of times, I really wanted to talk about the whole process behind designing. Now I explained a little bit how this sweater came to be and what were my ideas and thoughts behind it. But I was reading this blog post by Sister Mountain. She is a knitwear designer, and she was in the blog post she was explaining the whole process, designing process, and it was actually something I found really hard, and I struggled with a lot in the beginning, was just how to get started, because it just seems impossible, and there are so many things you have to think about, and so many aspects. And even though you can design something for yourself, you have to, at least if it's a garment, you have to grade it, you have to have it tested and make sure that it works for everybody. And I'm quite petite and I don't have much of a chest, so sometimes it's hard for me to imagine where should for example, where should this yoke end? What would look flattering on a bigger bust, and stuff like that. So I might have made this for me and it works for me, but I would like it to work for everybody. So it was quite a struggle to figure out the different the different measurements, and but not only, I mean, I can do the math, but also to be sure that it would actually be flattering. It was, in the beginning, I didn't know that you could use a tech editor, for example, and actually it's one of the things I've been the most happy about in this process is I decided to put out the money for a tech editor, because even though you think you have thought about everything and all your numbers are correct, you just go a bit blind when you're sitting with the pattern yourself. And yeah, it's a bit expensive, but I think it's worth it, and especially if you want to go somewhere with your design. If your plan is to improve and to get better at designing and making patterns, I think it's a good investment. For me, it's an investment because I don't think I will really earn anything on this sweater. I put out money, I put out time, and I don't know how much I could, if I will actually earn anything. And once I decided that was not I was fine with that. I was fine with not earning anything, and I was fine with using this to learn about the design process, and that I actually just really wanted to get my idea out there. That what makes me happy is reading people's comments. Of course, I mean, if in the end you want to live from this, that's not enough. You cannot live from sweet comments and likes, but I decided that that's not my focus at the moment. At the moment, it's more to enjoy, but I want to do it in a professional way. So that's been I've learned from this process that you have to go through all the steps. And she explains all the steps in her post, and I wish I had a post like that when I started to design, because it just seems so impossible that you have to think about all the things. And then I found testers, but then I didn't have a tech editor ready, and then they had to wait, I had to wait, and in the end it ended up taking much longer than I would even imagine, just getting the design out there. And I'm so happy I managed to get this design out, released before the winter was over, because what's the point in having a big nice sweater design out in, when we get into March, right? So, and the thing is, what can be a bit tricky is you feel a bit like all the designers they know all the tricks, but they're keeping them a secret. And I can understand why, because now I spend so much time figuring out how this whole process works. And yes, there are people who explain it a little bit, but all the details and of course the experience and figuring out what actually works and what doesn't, it's like you feel like you put so much of yourself into figuring this whole thing out that you don't just want to give it away to the next person, because it was so difficult for yourself. And I think that's a bit of a pity sometimes, because it makes it really difficult for others to get into it. So I think it's really great that someone like Sister Mountain decided to write a blog post with a little more information about how it works, and to make it a little more accessible to others who have the idea to design. And for me, one of the other struggles is that I'm actually not that great with math. I kind of failed my math exams in high school. Oh yeah, I did. I mean, I'm not that bad with simple math. I don't really enjoy math if it doesn't have a purpose, and for me, at least in high school, it didn't really have a purpose. But I think now that I see the purpose to, for example, make different sizes or figuring out how many stitches, it's not a problem for me. but in the beginning I just felt like, oh, all the math I have to do, it's so overwhelming, and but I think now that I've tried it, it's not that scary anymore. And actually, as I talked about in the last episode with where I went through all my sweaters that I've knit back in time, this Nina sweater class that I mentioned, it's a really good way to get more familiar with the whole math aspect of sweater knitting and garment construction. It's not a design guide, but it just helps you to feel like you understand it a bit more, at least if you're like me and math just seems a little bit scary and daunting. So I think that's a really good way to get more into it. And then you have to start looking at things in a more like you want to learn and you want to make the best possible. So you have to do the swatch, you have to realize what is your gauge, you have to test out different things. A lot of swatching is necessary, because if you just say, oh, I want to knit, and I used to do that a lot when I was younger, I just want to knit and want to make things, and then in the end you might not, first of all, really have thought about how it's gonna look. So it's more of a coincidence if it looks good. Then I'm still learning that a bit, because I really like to get going and I really like to see the things. I have a hard time, I cannot just do all the math and then imagine what it would look like. But I'm getting much better at also writing notes as I go and be much more structured about the whole design process. And I think if you want to do this, there's no easy way, you just have to put in the hours. And if you don't think it's fun to sit and, it might not be fun to do swatches, but if you don't have if it doesn't seem interesting to you, then maybe designing is not really for you. So I wish somebody would have talked about this more when I would have found somebody talking about this more when I was thinking about starting to design. So that's why I'm trying to explain all the ideas behind. And then there's one more thing I wanted to mention about the pattern, because that's one thing that's really hard when you're starting out, is of course you have to get testers. And if you don't have a big follower base on Instagram, or for some reason the pattern doesn't appeal to people, because there are Ravelry groups where you can look for testers, but I look for testers there, I look for testers on Instagram, and I actually couldn't find any testers for the bigger sizes. So this pattern is only made for size small, medium and large, simply because I couldn't get testers. And I think it will get easier the more patterns I publish, the more, let's say, more people get to know me, because it's also difficult I didn't have a lot of followers, so I didn't have to get the word spread that I was looking for testers. But it was a bit nerve-wracking, first of all, asking for testers, because I was so afraid that I wouldn't get any. And then I did get some testers, and I had some great testers, but I didn't have the luxury of having more sizes. And of course you can pay for that, but I don't think, at least with the testing, I don't think it should, I cannot afford to pay for it. It would be way too expensive. So that was not an option. And then I just decided that it would only be 3 sizes, but that was not, it was not a problem. It wouldn't have been a problem for me adding more sizes, and I actually did the math. So I have a size extra large and large, extra large and extra large in the, I calculated all the size for those two, but I haven't had them tested, so I don't want to publish them. So in case anybody should be interested in the bigger sizes, we could figure something out, but for now that's why the pattern is not out in more sizes. So sometimes it might seem like, oh, the designer maybe only wants to do the sizes for smaller people, but that's not the case. All sizes are great. You need to have people who can help you figure out if your calculations are good. So I think I talked and talked and talked, and I'm so and I've been squinting because the light is quite bright, and I feel like I'm sitting like this for the whole time. I hope this was not too boring. I'm still trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work as topics to talk about in this podcast, and yeah, I will end it off now because I'm just rambling. I hope you have a lovely Monday. Oh well, maybe it's Tuesday by the time I get this up, and that you are all doing great. And please go find me on Instagram. I have an Instagram account that's Fiber Tales, and I'm also on Ravelry as Fiber Tales. I will put the links in the down bar. And yeah, give it a like if you liked, comment, subscribe. I would be really happy. I'm so happy every time I get a comment, and it just makes my day. So don't be afraid. Oh, and I forgot to say, we have a Ravelry group, and I started a few threads. So if you want to ask any questions, feel free to do it in the Ravelry group. If you have any suggestions for things you want to hear about it in the future, and there's also a thread just to say hello and introduce yourself if you feel like that. And that's all. Bye.